Dominic is chairman of ISBA Executive, Personal Marketing Director of RSA Group, and Stephen's chairman of the Marketing Society. Guys, we've just got about sort of 10 minutes to talk through what we've just heard. Just tell us who you represent. Stephen, first of all, just tell us about the membership of the Marketing Society.
The membership of the Marketing Society is about 2,500 of the senior marketeers in the UK, and in fact a lot of them, of course, are global companies. And essentially it's quite an exclusive network of the top marketeers, and we have a series of about 60 events a year. We have an online clubhouse with all sorts of information and resources, and we do awards and various other things. So we're representing the great and the good of the marketing community, and obviously we've got a bias towards client organisations.
Clients.
So
this is a key word. Yeah.
It's probably
clients.
Maybe something 80% clients and about 20% agencies and intermediaries.
Yeah, and a lot. Stephen, just tell us a little about ISBA for those many people be members.
Dominic. ISBA is probably the leading industry body representing advertising companies. We've got about 400 members. We represent about 10 billion worth of marketing communication spend. And the focus of the organisation is really about safeguarding our freedoms as advertisers with regulation, protecting us from changes in the media market, and also defining and driving best practices where relationships with agencies really ties in.
Right. So I just want to know where you are on what we've just heard from Ian. Stephen.
Yes, we're fully supportive. I think when Ian first started talking about his agenda a while ago, we absolutely support it in every way. I mean, I think we know that it's interesting. Our conference that we're running later this year is entitled Creativity for Commerce. And we got people like Richard Curtis and Peter Bazalgette speaking. And so the whole theme, if you like, about commercial creativity is absolutely at the heart of what we believe in at the Marketing Society. But also, the whole principle of the trust and solid relationships being the core of agency-client relationships and partnerships is absolutely something we support. I mean, we had a very successful lunch with an IPA Joint Marketing Society lunch with some of our senior members just the other day. And some of the themes that are coming out are the kind of themes you'd expect. People are saying, it's all about the bedrock is about a trusting relationship. It's a single agenda. You believe in the long term. We're out not to do different things. We've all got the same interests, and those kind of things are undoubtedly what's at the heart of great client-nature relationships. And of course, we know that the great relationship creates the environment that creates the great creativity, and the great creativity creates the ROI, the effectiveness that we've seen through the videos. So it's a kind of holy trinity, if you like, of creativity.
But do you recognise the problem that Ian was identifying around tenure that's too short? Actually, it's basically promiscuity, isn't it? Clients just moving on more quickly, perhaps repitching, moving on, and never really sort of investing in the relationship. Do you recognise that from the client side?
Yes, absolutely. I think there is and I think as you rightly asked before, there are times obviously when things just don't quite work, and like any relationship, and it's not right to continue. But I think that the first thing you do, and I think the general view would be, certainly amongst our members, is that, you try and fix it. The first thing you do is you work either with an intermediary or a consultant or internally, and you try and find a way of making that relationship work, because as we know, it's costly to move an agency. It takes up a lot of time. It causes a lot of stress. There's all sorts of problems that go with it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but the cliched analogy with a marriage is a very good one, because you work at it first before you look at alternatives.
Yeah, and I suppose if you're Abramovich and let's stick with football. But I mean, if you're Abramovich and you're managing, or you're a client, you want to ask yourself before you fire the agency. Yes. Am I firing this agency because I'm slightly addicted to moving on every 3 years? Or am I firing it genuinely because this relationship is not really working? Yes. And I think if you look at Abramovich, he's quite a lot of the time he's right just to get rid of the manager, but quite a lot of the time they've been delivering spectacular success, and he's just been stupid to get rid of it.
I would say, speaking as straw poll of one, I don't think many clients enjoy pitching. It's a hugely destabilizing process. And the risk to your delivery in your own organisation and your reputation is huge. Not just because through the period of the transition, success or sales, whatever, will dip, but also because if you choose the wrong agency partner through the pitching process, then that reflects very poorly on you. So, speaking as a client who's currently going through a pitch exercise, it is not a pleasant experience for anyone concerned. So I think we would agree with Ian. Pitching is not something that we should be doing willy-nilly or off the cuff. It should be something that's very considered, and I think it should be managed in an effective way. And one of the things that we've been doing with the IPA historically at ISBA is finding a way to define what best practice for pitching is. And we did a wonderful process over the last 2 years called the Good Pitch. If anyone's not been on the website, please go on there, containing some best practice processes and really some rules of the game.
Yeah, yeah. Economists have these two words. There was actually a very good book called Exit, Voice and Loyalty, which was written back in the 1970s, I think. It's a massively old book that just hits at all these issues. And it talks about, there are two strategies for dealing with buying services. One is exit. You just go in and buy and then move on. So you exit relationships all the time. And the other is you use your voice to develop the relationships. And I suppose it plays to Ian's point about constant feedback and talking about what you're doing, what you like, what you don't like. Would you agree that that's a big part of making the relationships between clients and agencies work, that there needs to be a kind of inbuilt review mechanism of some kind?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it is. I think that, you know, the best relationships are those that are very structured, those that have got very clear KPIs, those that have got, you know, as Ian said before, 360 reviews on a quarterly or half-yearly basis. But I suspect, again, it comes down to, like any great relationship, you know, you've got to work at it. So, you know, you've got to keep delivering every single day, you know. And again, if we look at some of that appraised data, a lot of the things that clients understandably are complaining about are the operational delivery issues, which is obviously often why some pitches come about, actually, more so maybe than some other things. And actually, you know, that scenario you obviously got to constantly work at. You've also got to make sure that every single day, you know, you're adding spark and creativity to the relationship. You know, again, it's not different to a lot of personal relationships where you can't get complacent. And I think that's how you overcome these problems. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, you make sure that, you know, there's one of the things that came up when we had our joint IPA Multi-Society session last week was all about, you know, agencies spend more time in clients' offices, in call centres, in their sitting in their buildings, you know, spending more time working and implanting them in the client organisation so that they get close to the organisation.
But it's hard work.
I mean, I would just build on that and say one of the biggest challenges, certainly I think a lot of clients have, is when you have a very procurement-led pitch process, or you are a business that's focused on a 3-year cycle. To echo what was said in the video, trying to distill down an agency relationship into a set of rational measures is very difficult because the nature of the product is subjective, and to my mind, the relationships with your agency partners are based on some really strong emotional bonds that need to be there in order for the relationship to work. And I think in many industries where you're buying a more rational or a more tangible product, like a piece of IT equipment, it's not the same thing, which is why a lot of businesses that are maybe not marketing-led struggle with the marketing agency procurement process.
Here's a question that actually come in, which I think is relevant to you, Dominic, which is really, if the number of pitches reduces, if you went down a road where there was less contesting going on, would that affect startups and new agencies quite badly? Because it is a way for people to break in, basically. I mean, we shouldn't. The world has evolved to what it is, dysfunctional as it may be in part. It does have some advantages. I mean, it's not all just unambiguous, wonderful, we'll all be nice to each other. There are ways in which it might have a cost.
I mean, absolutely. I think one of the things that's happened in recent years, particularly with the growth of digital, is that we're seeing a number of smaller, more dynamic agencies starting up, taking risks and really being at the bleeding edge of technological development. And I think that, for me, particularly as a client who's focused on digital a lot of the time, offers me really unique opportunities to do things that maybe I can't do with more traditional agencies. But I don't think necessarily for me it's about throwing the baby out with the bathwater and exiting my current agency relationships. For me, it's about expanding my roster and seeing who I can test and learn with to build new capability into my marketing
Expanding
mix.
the roster rather than replacing someone. And just a quick last one for you, Stephen, another question that's come in. With marketing directors on average staying in their roles for only 18 months. Oh, it's just disappeared. No, here it is. And with often want to put their stamp on their new role and create new relationships, it's going to be difficult avoiding pitching. Is it true? I mean, what is the average tenure of marketing directors?
Yeah, I think it is actually longer than that. I'm not sure the exact figures, but I mean, clearly there are some organisations that have a regular turnover.
Yeah.
But I think
But that's just the same thing. I mean, it's just higher up the chain.
Exactly.
As a chief executive and the
yes,
chief
exactly.
marketing officer.
And one has to accept that, like any organisation, if you change the management, you change the vision, you change direction, therefore it's going to percolate down the organisation. But I think that it comes back to that bedrock of the trusting relationship, because if it's an emotional connection, if you like, between the client and the agency at a top level, then hopefully, if there's a lot of changeover of staff, it's a lot less of an issue than it would have, obviously, if it's entirely based on a single personality. So I think the way you get around it is to create a kind of emotional commitment between the two organisations, and I think that's what we all want to do.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've heard the IPA, the Marketing Society and IBSA all on the same page. Dominic, Stephen, thank you both very much indeed.
Pleasure.